This episode is sponsored by Delete Me. Hidden beneath the streets of Fort Worth are the remains of an abandoned subway that once carried thousands of passengers, and its story is anything but usual. You see, it wasn't built by the city, and it didn't charge a fare. This was Leonard Subway, a privately owned line that carried shoppers from a riverfront parking lot straight into the basement of a department store. This one-of-a-kind transit system, which was the only privately owned subway in the US at the time, connected Leonard's to its parking lots, offering free rides to customers and making downtown shopping a breeze. So, how did this remarkable venture come to be, and what led to its eventual demise? Stay tuned to find out as we uncover the story of the Leonard Subway. I'm your host, Ryan Socash, and you're watching It's History. Let's step back in time to the early 20th century, when the automobile was revolutionizing American life and retail was evolving at a rapid pace. It all started in 1918, when Marvin Leonard and his brother, Obadiah, opened a small dry goods store in downtown Fort Worth. What began in 1918 as a modest 25-foot wide storefront gradually evolved into a sprawling retail empire. By the 1930s, Leonard's department store had already taken over much of the surrounding block, and by the post-war years, it was a dominant presence in downtown. I should also point out that this was becoming a major trend across America in the early 20th century. The department store was becoming a symbol of modern life. These weren't just places to buy goods, they were destinations. Unlike the narrow, specialized shops that dominated cities and towns for generations, department stores offered everything under one roof: clothing, furniture, appliances, and even groceries. They promised variety, convenience, and a certain spectacle of shopping that felt new and exciting. In cities like Chicago and New York, grand flagship stores rose as architectural statements, so it was only natural that in Fort Worth, Leonard's carved out its own version of this retail revolution. Perhaps less ornate than its East Coast counterparts, but every bit as ambitious. With that in mind, what really set Leonard's apart wasn't just the size. It was their relentless focus on customer convenience and their uncanny ability to anticipate what shoppers needed next. And in that context, as suburban life and car ownership exploded in the 1950s and 60s, parking congestion became a hellish challenge for customers. This is when the Leonard brothers did something unthinkable. Rather than abandon downtown like so many others did, they came up with something that no other department store in America had attempted: a private subway line to bring shoppers in from a massive riverfront parking lot. But before we dive into how this incredible system was built, I'd like to share a quick word with you from today's sponsor, Delete Me. Try this. Google yourself. You notice how much of your personal information is already out there? Well, you might be shocked at just how easily anyone can find out everything about you in seconds. That's right, your personal data, your name, address, phone number, and more. It's all for sale. And what's the worst part? This is a billion-dollar industry. In fact, it was recently discovered that data broker databases were even selling information on US military personnel. So if even those with high levels of security measures aren't safe, what does that mean for the rest of us? That's where Delete Me comes in. I use it personally and recommend it because it works. It removes your information from hundreds of databases where it shouldn't be. And it's not just a one-time fix. Delete Me continuously monitors to ensure your data doesn't resurface. When you sign up, Delete Me scans data broker sites and gives you a detailed report on where your information is exposed. They then remove it and track it to ensure that it stays gone. I tried it myself, and it shocked me to see how many sites had my personal information without my knowledge. In just days, all of that unauthorized data was wiped from multiple databases. So don't let your personal information keep getting sold without your consent. Take control today. Use my code SOCASH or click the link in the description for 20% off. Go to joindeleteme.com/SOCASH, activate your plan, and reclaim your privacy. Don't wait until someone else misuses your data. Protect yourself now. And remember, online privacy isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. Every day you go without protecting your information is another day that anyone can access it. Thanks to Delete Me for sponsoring this video and helping more people take back control of their data. The Leonards were known for their practical solutions, wrapped in novelty. For example, they had once issued their own currency during the Great Depression, but the idea of building a private subway was simply audacious. and surprising. So when they pitched this idea to local leaders, they were very surprised to find that almost everyone supported it. The concept was bold. A private rail line would ferry customers from a newly built 5,000-car parking lot along the Trinity River, straight into the basement of the store without ever stepping foot on a street corner. According to the Fort Worth Star-Telegram in 1963, civic leaders praised the Leonards for their initiative and foresight, calling the subway, quote, a model of private enterprise, one that would relieve downtown congestion without costing taxpayers a dime. From there, the plan moved swiftly through city approvals, a process which indeed was helped by the fact that the entire system would run on Leonard-owned property. In other words, no public vote, no bond measures, and no red tape. Construction began later that year with a projected cost of roughly $1 million, half of that for tunneling, stations, and infrastructure, and the other half for acquiring and refitting rolling stock. Curiously, Leonard's bought retired streetcars from Washington, D.C. and gave them a full overhaul, adding air conditioning, modern controls, and a fresh new look. They were sturdy PCC models built to last and perfect for this job. Now, the engineering challenge wasn't small. The tunnel had to run about 0.7 miles, cutting beneath Taylor Street and through the bluff near the Trinity River. About a third of the route was fully underground, emerging near a massive parking lot divided into zones with stations named Stop 1 through 4. From there, Tandy's contractors built the terminal directly into the basement level of Leonard's home store. And even though everything was privately funded, the project employed some of the region's most reputable contractors, such as Howes and Garrett, who proudly took out a newspaper ad during the opening week proclaiming, quote, "We did it, and we're glad." The subway opened on February the 15th, 1963, when Obadiah Leonard drove a golden spike into a wooden crosstie just before Mayor John Justin led the inaugural ride. Upon arrival, a cake shaped like a subway car greeted dignitaries. And then, just a few days later, Vaughn Monroe, a popular singer from the 40s and 50s, appeared on live TV from the subway platform to help promote this amazing new service. So at this point, you might be wondering, what was it actually like to ride this underground shopping shuttle? Well, your journey would begin in the sprawling 5,000-car parking lot near the Trinity River, divided into 4 zones, each with its own sheltered stop named 1 through 4. Once on board, riders found a clean, modern interior with updated upholstery and air conditioning, a rare luxury at the time. The cars even had color-coded panels of their exteriors to help passengers distinguish between them. The ride itself lasted just a few minutes, running at about 0.7 miles, with roughly a third of the way underground. The final stretch dipped into a tunnel carved through the river bluff and then glided beneath Taylor Street before arriving directly inside the basement terminal of Leonard's home store. It was smooth, quick, and most importantly convenient. Shoppers could step off the train and be on the sales floor in moments. From the very beginning, the public reaction was overwhelmingly positive. Newspapers like El Paso Times reported that the subway was a hit with shoppers, praising it for keeping cars off the congested streets and bringing families back to downtown retail. And the service wasn't just limited to Leonard's customers either. Office workers, bank employees, and even folks headed to jury duty at the nearby Justice Center used these trains. At its peak, the system moved around 3,000 riders a day, jumping up to 4,000 during major court dates. Though that was never the point. Leonard's enjoyed a massive increase in foot traffic and sales during a time when many downtown stores were losing ground to suburban malls. The free subway, paired with the free parking, turned a logistical headache into a competitive edge. The success didn't go unnoticed. The concept caught the attention of retailers and developers all across Texas. In fact, some even capitalized on this new infrastructure. For example, Stripling's, Leonard's main downtown rival, mentioned their proximity to the subway in their ads. And city officials from other towns also came in to tour the system, though no true imitations ever emerged. But the subway wasn't just limited to the transportation of people. They also found additional innovative ways to utilize it. Behind the scenes, the system also moved freight. Delivery trucks could offload goods near the parking lot, where the subway cars would efficiently shuttle crates, boxes, and merchandise directly into the store's basement, thereby avoiding street traffic entirely. Though there were some challenges. As the years went on, maintenance became more difficult. You see, the cars were already old when Leonard's bought them, and now they were truly showing their age. And of course, replacement parts weren't easy to come by. Still, for a time it all worked, and perhaps that's precisely why no one saw how fast things could fall apart. By the early 1970s, downtown Fort Worth was beginning to feel the same pressure that had already transformed cities across the United States. Suburban malls were booming, meaning people weren't just shopping differently, they were living differently. And with that, the convenience that once set Leonard's apart was quickly becoming standard elsewhere, with parking, air conditioning, and wide open floor plans all under one suburban roof. And while the subway still had its charm, the cars were starting to really show their age. The original PCC streetcars, already used when Leonard's bought them from DC Transit, were now pushing 30 years old. And the public simply didn't want to ride in these dated-looking vehicles. Even after Tandy rebodied the cars with boxier shells and updated interiors, it couldn't hide the fact that the system was rooted in an earlier era. The ride was no longer seen as futuristic. If anything, it looked dated. Meanwhile, the heart of the system, Leonard's department store, was unraveling. Marvin Leonard had sold his majority stake to his brother Obadiah in 1965 due to his declining health. Then, in 1967, the family sold the business outright to Tandy Corporation for $8.5 million. On the surface, it was a win, but behind the scenes, the store began to lose its identity. Tandy kept the original name until 1974, when they sold the retail business to Dillard's. With that, the Leonard name came down forever. Literally, the flagship store was demolished to make room for a new downtown office and shopping complex, the Tandy Center, a commercial complex that never really lived up to expectations. Anchor tenants came and went, and downtown Fort Worth continued to hollow out. Even a brief rebranding as an outlet center in the mid-1990s couldn't reverse the decline. As for the Leonard brothers, they had already faded from public view long ago. Marvin passed away in 1970, and Obadiah lived long enough to see the subway's final years, but neither brother was involved in the system's last chapter. There would be no more brotherly stunts. Once the store was gone, their vision had run its course. The subway itself lingered on for some time, primarily out of convenience, as office workers from Tandy Center used it to commute from the parking lot, as well as courtgoers who used it on jury days. However, the system was no longer attracting shoppers, and certainly not generating profits. And with that, in 2001, when Radio Shack, formerly Tandy, announced plans to build a new corporate campus, the subway became obsolete. The parking lot it depended on was slated for redevelopment, and hence the end was official. On August the 30th, 2002, after nearly 40 years of operation, the Leonard subway made its final run. More than 100 people showed up for that last ride, including Leonard family members and longtime employees. One child who rode it on opening day also returned with her granddaughter. Otherwise, the tunnel was just sealed, the stations were boarded up, and the last privately owned subway in the US was abandoned. After the last ride in 2002, Fort Worth's private subway slipped out of sight, but never entirely out of mind. For years, the tunnel sat beneath the streets. The tunnel, which was still intact, had been sealed at both ends. The station platforms also remained beneath Taylor Street and 2nd, slowly gathering dust. And throughout the years, many had hoped that the system would be revived. There were whispers at times about reopening the line for public transit or even turning the space into a museum. But nothing came of it. This infrastructure wasn't built to last forever, and without a store to serve, it simply lacked a purpose. These days, little remains. Though inside One City Plaza, the first Leonard subway car number 1, is on display in the lobby and fully restored. This is the same car that Obadiah Leonard rode on that opening day. Nearby, a small museum preserves artifacts from the store's golden era, and I'd argue that this museum is the most precious time capsule of Leonard's bygone time, since the entire exhibition is curated by Marvin's daughter. As for the other cars, some were sent to local transit preservation groups, such as the McKinney Avenue Transit Authority and the North Texas Historic Transportation Collection, whereas the rest were simply scrapped for spare parts. But what about that massive parking lot down by the river? It's gone. It was cleared in the early 2000s to make room for the Radio Shack corporate headquarters, and later became a part of the broader downtown redevelopment. As for Leonard's department store itself, nothing remains above ground. The The store was demolished in the mid-1970s, and the space where it once stood is now part of a modern office and retail complex. Yet, even with all these physical traces fading, the Leonard subway left its mark. For longtime Fort Worth residents, it's remembered as something more than a curiosity. It was a symbol of optimism, creativity, and civic pride, representing a moment when a family business believed in downtown enough to dig beneath it. We'll leave it there for today. Until next time, I'm Ryan Socash, signing off.